When creating relationships in a database, there are other considerations that you also need to make, and they include enforced referential integrity, join types, Cascade update, and Cascade delete. For example, we've created the relationships in our class management database, but we haven't addressed enforced referential integrity. Let's take the case of the instructor and the class table. If I double-click the existing relationship line, I have the option here in the form of a checkbox, enforce referential integrity. If I was to tick this option and then click OK, I can tell I've turned on the enforce referential integrity because of these symbols. What basically happens is the field that is the primary key, in this case instructor ID, indicated by this little key, is then considered the parent table. And this particular field in this particular table has got the infinity symbol, and so this is considered the child table and the foreign key. So we have the parent table and the primary key, and the child table and the foreign key. And what it's decided is, because this is a primary key, the instructor ID will only occur once in this table. So one instructor potentially can teach many classes. This is a one-to-many relationship. Let's have a look at this particular relationship between the table class and the table student and class. Again, I'm going to double click this line. I'm going to turn on the enforced referential integrity. Notice the relationship type is mentioned here, and I'll click OK. One class can potentially have many students enrolled in that class. Let's also look at this relationship here. I'm going to double click this line here, enforce referential integrity, and OK. One student, primary key, parent table, can potentially enroll in many classes. Here's the child table and the foreign key, one to many. Also, if I double click this line here, I can turn on the enforced referential integrity, and when I click OK, one student can ultimately have many results. And finally, this relationship here, I'll double click, and I'll also turn on the enforced referential integrity, and OK. And one assignment can have many results. Perhaps they did the assignment the first time, and then they got the opportunity to reset the assignment, so that assignment has been done twice, and so it can have two different results. So enforced referential integrity is very important. Let's take the case of student and class. Basically what it says is, when I'm filling out the child table and I'm entering a record, and I say it's this particular class and this particular student, when I enter the student in the foreign key, what it'll do is it'll check that that reference has integrity, i.e. it will run off to the parent table and check that student ID exists. And if that student ID does not exist in the parent table, the enforced part means that it will not let you put that particular student ID in that field. So when you're filling in a child table and you fill in a foreign field, if you enter a student, it will double check that that student ID exists in the primary field in the parent table, and if it doesn't have integrity, i.e. it doesn't exist, the enforced part means it will not let you put that student in. Now, another consideration when creating relationships are join types. Let's again take the case of instructor and class. I'm just going to double click this line here. When you are creating enforced referential integrity, to your right you have a join type, and if we click this button here, we can see what the default join type is. The default is only include rows where the joined fields from both tables are equal. We can change this. We could actually say no, include all records from the instructor and only those records where the instructor has been put against a class. So by choosing this option here, or this join type here, we're basically saying if we create a query or we create a report, we want to see all instructors, whether they're down for doing a class or not, instead of just the instructors that are currently down for a class. And we'll address this more closely when we get to the query section of this notes. So I'm just going to choose OK and OK, and what I see here is a little arrow, and this tells me that there's a left outer join between these two tables. Another consideration is Cascade update, and again let's just have a look at the relationship between the table instructor and the table class. If I again double click this line, I have the option to tick an option, Cascade update. Now the idea here is if there is a change to the instructor's ID, it will cascade through and update the instructor ID in the child tables. So if the instructor ID is based on text, and perhaps it's some sort of the first 4 letters of their surname, for example, and then that instructor changes the first 4 letters of their surname. Perhaps they get married and choose to change their surname. If I change the instructor ID in here, it will cascade through and update the instructor ID in here, so that we don't get loose ties between these two tables. So I'm going to turn this on and OK. And in fact I'm going to turn on Cascade Update for all relationships. So if there is any change, in this case to the student ID, it will cascade through and update the student ID in this related table. And the last consideration when creating relationships between tables is Cascade Delete. For example, let's take the case of the table student and the table student in class. I'm going to double click the relationship line again. And the other option I have to tick is Cascade Delete. Now the idea here is if something should happen to that student and that student ID becomes deleted, that whole record becomes deleted, I want it to cascade through to all the related tables and delete the student from the related tables. So if that student should become unenrolled or deceased, then we can delete the student and it will cascade through and delete any related records in the related tables. So I'm going to Cascade Delete. And I'll do it for all of the relationships. So again, I don't get loose ends between tables. Oops, I've missed. Try again. And that's our relationships established.